At Parker, our purpose is simple. We want to make the world a better place by working more efficiently, by using more sustainable practices, by developing better technologies. We keep moving forward. With each new idea, innovation, and partnership, we're one step closer to fulfilling our purpose every single day. To find out more, visit parker.com/purpose. Parker, engineering your success.
You have one unheard message.
Hi, I was calling Current, the influencer marketing platform, but I think I just got redirected to a bunch of people listening to a podcast. Well, anyways, I was calling Current because I was told they could help get my brand set up on TikTok Shop and even build out an affiliate program of content creators promoting my brand. And even have those content creators go on live streams and promote my product there. Wow, I could really use Current. I also heard that the brands they work with are making millions in sales. I guess I'll just go to their website at current.tech.
No music, no intro. Another episode of #Saints Twitter podcast. This is an episode that I've been really excited to do. If you listen to the show, you know that Ryan and I have been trying to get someone on and not have a football related podcast. We've had episodes in the past a bit with the whole social injustice thing with Patrick in the past, talking about racial issues, but we wanted something even more different that isn't football related. And so I'm very thrilled to introduce Steve Harper. I was just doing a little bit of research on, IMDb, and I don't even want to miss anything in terms of your accolades.
Make it sound so daunting.
No, I mean, I just started going through them, and I was like, oh, wow, it's so impressive. But Steve is, he was a producer recently on the CBS show God Friended Me. He works in Hollywood. He's a playwright. He's a writer. He's a producer. We're excited to have him on and just talk about something that isn't Saints football related. So obviously, if you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to listen to it. But I do implore you to be open-minded, and I think I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have. So thanks for joining us, Steve. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and I think I'm the perfect guest for you to have to not talk about football because I know very little about it.
Good for you.
We can't really go in that direction, at least too far, anyway.
So we'll starting off with just your origin story, for the lack of a better word. Saw that you were born in New York, was raised in Long Island. But what got you interested in what you currently do and working in entertainment? Like what led to you going out and reaching out and getting reaching your passion?
Yeah. I think I always was interested in the idea of I grew up in a TV household, so we used to watch television all the time, and there was such a connection to the shows we were watching and the way we would, I don't know that this lasted all the way through high school, but I was born in Brooklyn, and in at least when we lived in Brooklyn, we would watch TV as a family on Saturday nights, and we would watch like the same sets of shows and have conversations about them, and there was a way in which TV really brought us together. It just sort of seemed like a way to congregate and connect and share sort of experiences. And I think to this day, I really feel like it's one of the reasons why television, I love working in TV. I also love watching TV because there's something about the community that gets created in and around that, and sort of those long-term kind of relationships with a character on a particular show that you don't get in other, in film or even theater, where it's really about sort of burning down one story and getting to the end. So I feel like I've always been drawn to the notion of being in relationship with characters for like long-term storytelling stuff. And at first in my life, my first foray into the industry was as an actor, which, I did for decades and still do some when I get the opportunity, and I really, it just really drew me. It was a really kind of cool way to, both make believe and connect and reach people. That's really sort of the origin of it, I think, in a way.
I really wanted to ask you, this really might sound like a dumb question from someone who,
There are no dumb questions.
but I love theater. I love movies. Both me and Adam, we just huge movie heads. Love pop culture. I love consuming those things.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, what exactly is a producer? Like, what does a producer do? Is there a set thing that a producer does, or is it just one of those kind of things where it could be anything? Anything that you're doing, but it's pretty an important position in TV and film.
Well, I think it definitely is an important position. It kind of depends on who you ask and what kind of producer they are, because I think in movies, more often than not, and also in theater, producers are people who they're basically people who sort of help bring the elements together. So quite often in movies and in theater, like Broadway kind of stuff, producers are really money people. They're the people who are funding the production, who are raising the money for the production, who are dealing with the books. In movies, there's something called the line producer, who literally is, that's the person who's got the budget and is looking at the lines of the budget, being like, how do I fill this position? And how do I fill this position? And how do I make sure these people, we don't go over budget or over salary on this thing or that thing or special effects or whatever, and is really kind of holding the financial space. So that's sort of one version of a producer. But in the world of television, it's actually, it's interesting because TV, the word producer has so many meanings. As a writer, I'm a television writer, and so in the space of writing, and people outside the industry don't know this, but people in the industry do, basically the job of a TV writer, which we can get into, is a really fascinating thing. But all of the jobs, like everybody, I'm currently, my title is supervising producer on a show called Stargirl, which is on the CW, which is a really cool, really fun show that you can find the first season of on CWTV.com. And it's Stargirl is a DC superhero, and the guy who created the show, a man named Jeff Johns, who's pretty brilliant and has done a ton in the DC Comics world and the Marvel Comics world. He's written a ton of stuff. He created Stargirl, and Stargirl is based on his sister who died in a plane crash, and so there's which is horrible. But what that means for us is that he's got this very sort of open-hearted sort of generosity of spirit about what he wants to do with this show. So, that's sort of another conversation, but essentially, he's created this show that it's a family show. It's a show that works both for teenagers, because Stargirl and a lot of her compatriots are in high school, but it also, she's got a stepfather, played by Luke Wilson, and a mom played by Amy Smart. And so it works on both levels of, it's really cool. It's very fun. And I was watching it even before I got on the show. So you should check it out, and your listeners should check it out as well. But in the writer's room, just to get to the producer part, everybody, I think there are 9 or 10 of us, and we're all essentially doing the same job, which is, Jeff comes up with an idea and we flesh out the idea. And we're in the writer's room. Our writer's room is virtual now because it's, because of COVID times. And we kick around ideas about what the scenes might be, what the moments might be, who the new characters are, and what the dramatic changes are in, over the course of the season, over the course of the episode. And so we're all doing that. And yet at the same time, the Writers Guild and the industry have, they've created these steps, this sort of hierarchy of how writers are, labeled, like what the technical term is for somebody who's a beginning writer in the room, and then the next level and the next level. And those titles are, they're all titles for people who do the same thing, but just at a higher level of seniority. And so that goes staff writer, which is oddly enough, the only title that has the word writer in it, is the entry level. So it goes staff writer, next level is story editor, next level is executive story editor, then co-producer, then producer, then supervising producer, then like something called like consulting producer, then co-executive producer, and then executive producer. And all of those people can be writers on any given show. But there are certain people, like people who handle the money, for example, who might also have the title producer. So you kind of have to know, when you watch TV at the very beginning, one of the interesting things, you guys can do now is next time you're watching TV, you see all those people who are listed at the beginning, 90% of them are writers, all those people who are listed like as the show's coming on. And then some of them might do money stuff. And, so it's a little confusing, but I think the higher up in the food chain you go, the more responsibility you have in terms of the more you're expected to bring story ideas. And, and then on certain shows, you, what we call produce your episode, which means you're on set with the actors and the director and, the technicians and the stagehands and all that stuff. And you help, you're there as a resource about what we were thinking in the writer's room when we came up with this scene. So, you can give the director some feedback, or, the director may give some actors feedback based on what you have to say. And you're there sort of in some level kind of quality control, I guess.
Thanks so much for that breakdown. No, and I say that with no hyperbole. Like it really truly, like I knew about some of it, but you like how you just worded it and let it, just explained it thoroughly. Like it makes a lot of sense. So the functions that you've had working in the industry, writing, producing, acting, I know you've done directing a little bit as well. Which one do you gravitate towards the most in terms of which one do you love the most in terms of that function? Wow. and why?
Wow. Well, yeah, it's tough. I feel like in my heart, I will always be an actor, and there's something really amazing about like being like physically embodying the instrument to tell a story. Like that actually, to sort of like touch on the area that you guys normally are on, like in the space of sports, like it's like you are whoever that player is the instrument for the way the game gets played. So there's something really magical about that as an actor, to kind of literally step into the interpretation of a role, of a character, of an emotional space, of a situation. Like there's nothing like that. At the same time, what I feel like I've discovered for me is that, first of all, in all of the arts, and I think perhaps acting especially, there's the joke like you can make a killing, but you can't make a living, and there is that space where, especially as a Black actor, I think, or any actor of color, at least so far in the industry, there are so many needles, so many threads, so many needles you have to thread in order to get to be the person, to get to be like that Black guy who gets that part on that show to do that thing, and I think, I make up that for white people, at least, so far, and in the industry, with so much of the industry kind of like in the gaze of whiteness, like it's not an easy job for anybody because it's a challenging space, but there are generally more white people roles, Yeah. So I feel like in that space, if you can make a killing but you can't make a living, one of the things that I found, and of course, the statistics about getting into the Writers Guild are, it's also really hard to get in the Writers Guild and be a TV writer. But as a TV writer, by and large, what I look like and how old I am and whether I'm male or female doesn't matter as much as as it does being an actor. So I do feel like there's something really amazing for me about the writing space, about creating characters and worlds, both as a playwright and as a TV writer. And there's also something about, the notion of, I don't know, the idea at least of, on some level playing God. I mean, that sounds a little weird, but you sort of get to decide what the landscape of the creative space looks like. And as an actor, you really just sort of have to follow the map that you've been given. And the same for a director or any other interpretive art. But I feel like, to me, I think that's why I would put the writing on top, just because you get to create it and figure out what you want. And then that's really fun.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of brought it up.
Yeah.
What has been your experience, as a Black male in that entertainment, space? I mean, we've seen Hollywood sort of change over the years and try to adopt more of a quote unquote woke viewpoint, but there's still, it's a lot of hurdles for actors, producers, writers, directors, you name it. So what, how has your experience been? Has it been positive, or is it just one of those struggles that you just, you understand that you just have to deal with and fight through every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything, it's probably the second one. And it sort of depends on the day. It depends on who you're dealing with and what the show is and what the job is, both as an actor and as a writer. There is, as I said, like, we live in a country where, white people are centered. They're sort of like the central state, central focus of so many things. And, television and film and theater and like is no exception. I'm actually having the experience now. It's been really interesting that I have a new, I've been working with an assistant the past couple of years, which is sort of really kind of amazing to have somebody helping me do stuff. And, and my assistant is helping me identify places to send my plays. And, so I'm sort of doing that in addition to my job on Stargirl, is sort of like finding places to send plays and sending plays out and advertising plays. And, and I have a good friend who sends out a monthly newsletter with playwriting opportunities. And I've had the experience just this week of looking at a lot of these playwriting opportunities, and, and they're asking for whatever, 10-minute plays or longer full-length plays. And they're specifically now, everybody's trying to be more woke and trying to invite, playwrights of color or whatever. And I go to the websites of some of these theaters, and, the acting company is all white, and the administrators are all white, and, the shows they've done are like, a lot of shows from white playwrights that don't center people of color. It becomes this whole sort of all-encompassing thing about, well, where's the space? Where do we make the space? Do we create our own spaces? Do I just want to send my material to Black theater companies? Do I want to, what is the, so I think it is really pervasive, whether I'm talking about theater stuff. I've had conversations with my current boss about Stargirl, which I think, on some level has a bunch of diverse characters. And at the same time, I think we can do better. And we've talked about that, and so all of those things are all in play. And then to be, quite often I've had the experience of being the only Black person in a writer's room, and navigating that. Like, what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is the showrunner interested in hearing from me about, issues of culture or issues of cultural specificity? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I think it is a constant conversation. And I also think, though, we're all, I think any person of color, we're all managing on some level that space,
Oh yeah.
Constantly. So it's not any different. Like, I was raised to understand the white lens more than white people were raised to understand the lens of people of color. So on some level it's new, on some level it's not new.
I'm glad I'm glad that we're kind of, I mean, this is an open space. We don't really hide anything when we talk on this podcast. And that's something that Ryan and I have tried to, especially with everything going on in the world and police brutality and just Black men being killed and just the recurring, just the world that we're living in right now. There's been episodes where we've been very real and honest in regards to everything that's going on in the world. And for people who don't want to listen to it, then basically just not listen to the podcast. So since we're on this topic, something that I did want to get your thoughts on is that the whole, and I didn't read super a lot about it, but I just kind of briefly saw that like Christy Alley went on this like tangent that the Academy is basically putting in inclusion standards in terms of, you know, the films, in terms of they're going to be criteria to, you know, be nominated for an Academy Award. And me and Ryan kind of had this conversation offline yesterday, and thinking is like, what do you feel about that? Like, is that the answer and then the response to get more diversity, whether it be actors, writers, directors, what have you, for them to get recognition? I'm just like, or is that kind of going too far? And is that, you know, I'm just interested to just know what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, I certainly don't think, I don't think it's going too far. Now, I have to admit that I've seen the headlines and I haven't read a lot about it. So, you know, really I'm talking about my understanding of it. And I think that it's really, you know, obviously it's important to research stuff. So I encourage anybody listening and, you know, and you guys and certainly I will do some more research. But what I've understood is, from what I've gleaned from, you know, reading a little bit, is that these are rules that are being applied to specifically Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken.
Gotcha.
So, you know, so to me that seems like, oh, that sounds like a reasonable idea, that if you're talking about the Best Picture, an American film, that certain standards ought to be, you know, observed if you can in a movie. That seems like a reasonable thing to me. Now, I don't exactly know what they are. I've also seen headlines that say that these rules are not so hard to, you know, to follow, and that a lot of films are already sort of doing some version of that. So I don't really know. I can't really judge. But I do think, look, I think that the bottom line is, I believe that things need to change, and that people, organizations, companies, producers, writers, you know, the whole machine, you know, the whole corporate machine of television and film, you know, ought to be looking at new ways to thread the needle in terms of how we create, you know, work, so that the work, for me, it's about the work looking more like America. You know, when you talk about, you know, I believe the statistic is, in terms of the Writers Guild, that, you know, some very small percentage, I want to say 6, I'm not sure if that's entirely true, some very small percentage of the Writers Guild is Black people, you know. And so I think we really have to look at what it means, to the consequences of excluding people, you know, however it is, whether it's institutional or job related or whatever. But the consequences of that, I think, are huge in terms of the kinds of things that we make, and the kinds of things that are available to be seen. And I often say, I've said this before, like, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I'm sitting down to watch TV, I think, do I want to watch a white show, or do I want to watch a black show? Like, what do I want to do? Do I need to see people of color in this moment? Or is it okay to go over and watch a bunch of Friends and just know that I'm not going to see my, like, you know, it's real, you know, it's real for jobs. It's real for perception. It's real for understanding. It's real on so many levels.
And, you know, that's funny you talk about that. I'm curious, have you seen the show Lovecraft Country?
I have seen it. I saw the pilot of it. Yes.
Okay, and I've been having this thought about it. I've been watching it, and it's an interesting show. I can't, I don't know if I love it yet or not, but it's just I watch it every week, so obviously that's enough. But I just have this feeling like, just as a viewer, like when they create some of these shows and they integrate the horrific experiences of Black trauma that that we and our ancestors have experienced just over the hundreds of years in America, and they integrate that into these shows, and I understand why, like, these are stories that should be told, and
Right.
but just me as a Black man, sometimes I don't want to see it. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes I just kind of need a break from it because I live in that reality.
Yep.
And I know the history. I know, and I know my experiences every day. As a Black man growing up in the deep South, I know what goes on.
Yeah.
So like sometimes when I put on a movie or a TV show, I just kind of want to escape reality and just like just see something different and just take my mind somewhere. And then I watch a show like Lovecraft Country, which is very interesting and detailed and very creative. But it's like you got to throw it in my face that white people would do the monkey, act like a monkey behind us while we're eating a banana, or the big Aunt Jemima, billboard, and just those little things. And it's just like I just come away conflicted. Like, do I really feel like watching this? Because it's taxing emotionally for me, and it might not be for everybody, but just for me. And I was just wondering what you think about that. Just when you review films, review TV shows, when you write, is that something you think about, or do you feel like, hey, these are stories that need to be told whether you like it or not, and it's a story I want to tell, and that's it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, in a way, you sort of make it sound like like it's like eat your vegetables. Like it's got to be done, And I don't know that I believe in that. I do think, look, to me, I don't know. I feel like it's a matter of the freedom to create. I think in a way, what ends up happening if you create, if only certain people are allowed to create, then you get only certain kinds of creations. And I think there is a way in which, for a long time, and perhaps it's changing now. Your mileage may vary. Like, entertainment in America felt like one flavor of ice cream. And it was like, it's not a bad flavor, it's really good, and you can put some sprinkles on it, and you can put a little chocolate sauce or whatever, right? But now we're getting all these different flavors, and to me, there's so much benefit to the different flavors, right? Because, and I think what's fascinating too about us, as a people, is I don't know, I haven't heard other people of color, and other sort of, minority and marginalized groups complaining that there are too many of their stories. You know what I mean? So often my radar goes up when people are like, well, I don't want to hear any more about, X or Y. I don't want to hear any more about slavery. I don't want to hear more about it. It's like, well, wait a minute, how we don't say like, I don't want to hear any more about Japanese internment or not another Holocaust story. We're kind of like, it's just part of the fabric of what's out there.
Right.
The fabric becomes more interesting if people tell stories that they connect to, whatever that looks
like. That's a good point.
It is. I see both sides of it, because as an example, like, I will never ever watch Fruitville Station. Like, it's just a movie. Like, I'm sure I'm sure Michael B. Jordan is fantastic in it.
Yeah,
but
he is.
like to Ryan's point, like, I get it from both sides. I really do. I do.
Yeah, no, I'm not there. I'm not here to say that everything is for everybody. Like, I happen to have I had some interviews to work on Lovecraft Country, and it didn't work out. And I saw the pilot, and I think on some level the show is not for me. Like, it's not like I'm not big into horror. I'm not big into the amount of gore of the show. I mean, I love the actors and I sort of cheer them on. I have a friend who's on the writing staff, and I'm not saying that everything ought to be for everybody. Like I don't need to watch it, but it's different to say that it shouldn't be made. Like I feel like those are two different arguments, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I just can't. I'm not going to eat every food at every restaurant. That doesn't mean I should have restaurants. But on my behalf, restaurants ought to be shut down. That's a different.
Exactly.
I think
that's a perfect analogy.
It is, and I think to your point of the importance of why it shows are made is I had a friend, kind of from like the Ventura County area, lives in Thousand Oaks, lived a very white sheltered life, and until she watched Watchmen on HBO, had no knowledge of like the whole Tulsa massacres in Oklahoma. Like she said, like I had no idea. Like it wasn't taught in school. I didn't know about it until I watched the show. Which like for us as a people, we're like, what?
Like hello. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're from New York, Ryan's from Louisiana, I'm from Texas. Like no matter where we're from, like we all know. But for her, she was like, I had no clue. And then I did like research and it just really opened my eyes. And so I think to that point, like it is the importance of the stories being told is important because it does shed the light on things that if you're not a person of color or if you're not Black, that you may not know. Like if you're living a very sheltered, closed off, world and from a white lens, you may not know until you watch something in pop culture.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the magic of the entire entertainment space, whether it's theater or film or even music. It's like if you live in some small town somewhere and you haven't traveled, you can go to the movies or go on Netflix and you can in effect like take a trip to China, take a trip to Africa, take a trip to you can go any number of places and see things and people and experience things that you haven't experienced before. I feel like that's, it's really important that we're doing that because I feel like ultimately that's the space that allows us, hopefully, to talk to each other, recognizing how connected we are, even with our differences. That to me, that builds empathy. And that's kind of what being on the planet is all about.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. Something that Ryan and I have been very interested to see how it unfolds is the whole premium video on demand, like that landscape. We saw it with Mulan being released to Disney Plus, for $30. Obviously with, COVID and the pandemic going on. Do you feel like that is potentially here to stay? I know I was kind of like looking and there was some less than excited people about like the box office numbers that Tenet brought in, but I'm like, we're in a pandemic, so like, why is it any of this surprising? But do you feel like the premium video on demand industry or what have you is here to stay and can truly revolutionize the entertainment industry?
Yeah, I mean, again, like this is sort of not the corner of my expertise, but I do think that, for all of the companies, I currently, the show that I'm on is produced by Warner Brothers, and so, every one of these companies is a big corporation. And the question becomes, what is the corporation, what are they looking to do? Because as I've, they've been saying in stuff I've been reading and hearing, obviously when you have a Mulan, when you have a Hamilton, when you have these shows that can theoretically for your company bring in a lot of money, you are probably going to bring in less money if if somebody's paying a streaming fee to watch it at home. Because, if they're watching with a family of 5, then they're paying $30 for 5 people to see the movie, as opposed to going to the movie and paying a different admission price for each person, and then also having to buy popcorn and all that stuff. So so financially, I think that those movie companies are going to want to, and I think also filmmakers who are really interested, in seeing their work on the big screen, on these big prints and with an audience. That's one of the things I think is actually really interesting, not only financially, but also culture-wise, and you guys can relate to this, given the fact that, the NFL is starting up today, actually, right? It's like,
Yep.
there's this whole audience participation space, whether it's sports or concerts or theater, that is like nothing else. And like most writers, I'm a huge introvert, and I kind of love, like, there's part of me that kind of loves the whole lockdown thing, and I really get into it. And my writer's room is on Zoom, and I just don't have to go anywhere. But there is something about sitting next to somebody and hearing laughter, or that's one of the challenges, I think, of being a TV writer. As much as I love TV, and as I love being a TV writer, is there's almost no direct contact with the audience. It's one of the reasons why I love to tweet so much, because it's the only connection. It's the only way that I'll hear from random people about this episode or that episode, because I don't get to sit in anybody's home and see how they respond to that scene that we sweated over in the writer's room, or that joke, or that character, or that turn, or that we decided to kill this person, and how did people respond? The only way I can find out is social media. So I don't think that live theater or movies with people in the audience, I don't think that's going to go away. It might shift a little bit, but it's still such a unique experience that I just don't think it's going to disappear forever.
Yeah, it really is. I've tweeted a couple of weeks back, like, just in the middle of the pandemic, I just like, I would like pay big money just to go sit in a theater with a big pile of popcorn, and just watch a movie and not worry about, COVID-19 or anything like that. Just enjoy a movie. It could be any movie. I don't care what it is. Michael Bay movie. I don't care.
Yes.
Just sit back and enjoy it, because that experience is just, I don't know. I guess it's just,
Nothing like it.
Nothing like it. It's nothing like it. I wanted to ask you, like, what's the writing process like? Because one of my favorite shows of all time, The Wire, I've listened to a lot of those guys talk about their writing process, and I just imagine trying to interconnect all these different characters, and for shows that go on for so many episodes and seasons. I mean, what is that like? That has to be one of the most chaotic things ever. I don't know how you even come to do that.
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends on who you're working for. It's certainly a puzzle. So, I think obviously one of the great things about writing anything is that you get to, you gotta have the 30,000 foot view, and then you gotta have like the ground view, so theoretically, at least, whatever you're writing, you do some sort of outline that tells you, okay, these are the characters, here's what we're going to move through, these are the character arcs, these are what's going to happen emotionally, and like, here are some of the moments, and then you got to sort of go down to the moment by moment and figure out what comes next and what comes after that, and who says what, and where are the jokes, and like, you got to do all those things if you're writing by yourself. If you're writing with a group, you got to do those same things, but the sort of the biggest question becomes like, what's the order of those things? Because if I'm writing something by myself, I get to decide the order. I get to say, oh, I'm going to do an outline. I'm going to do half of an outline, and then I'm going to write a scene, or I'm not going to do an outline, and I'm just going to write scenes, or I'm going to start with dialogue, or, I get to kind of decide and just keep going until I feel like I've built something that actually works in some sort of dramatic way. So the trick is, in a writer's room, when you're writing with like 10 people, it's kind of all about who's the one who's steering the boat. Because whoever the showrunner, the creator, or the person who's running the writer's room that day, like, whoever that is, they're gonna decide, okay, let's talk about the, the season. Let's talk about all 13 episodes or 22 episodes, or let's talk about where we're going and where the lead character is going to end up in episode 23 or whatever it is, and then, all right, now let's focus on episode 1 and talk about blah, blah, blah. So they're going to guide in terms of, how, whether we're doing the bird's eye view or whether we're doing the view on the ground, and then once the showrunner says, okay, this is, say, like the wedding episode, then we as a group, we sort of go into this space that feels, it's more organized than this, but it feels a little bit like charades, because at some point that showrunner will then say, throw out some ideas about what might be, what might we use in this episode, and the showrunner might say, I see a scene where this happens and this happens and this happens, and then other people might say, well, there's also could be a moment here, and there could be and we collect all these ideas. Like every writer's room that I've been in has done that, and then from those ideas you collect, like, say 10 or 20 ideas. Then the showrunner, again, this person who's driving the boat or steering the boat, will say, I like these 3 ideas or these 5 ideas. Let's throw everything else out and let's focus on how we can build these 5 stories. And then you just, go one story at a time, again, sort of figuring out, okay, if this is going to happen, then what needs to happen next? And everybody chimes in. The showrunner's like, I like this idea. Let's do that. Let's create a scene that says this, and let's put a card on a whiteboard that says that. And then, so you keep doing that until you have a bunch of storylines, and then you eventually kind of shuffle those around, especially if you're on broadcast TV, you're shuffling those around so that some of the juiciest cliffhangery scenes come before the commercial break. So it's sort of like, in that way, it's like a big puzzle. And then at some point, after the room as a whole has done what we call breaking story and arranging all of those ideas in some shape, then a single writer will go off and write an outline, or, a story area, which is like a shorter version of the outline. And then those get approved by the studio, which is studio/production company. They're the people who are paying for it, so you'll get, so for example, on Stargirl, we are we have notes calls with Warner Brothers executives. We have notes calls with the Berlanti company, which also produces the show. So we have one notes call where they'll chime in on the outline of the story area or whatever. Then whoever the writer is will fix or change things based on those notes, and then give that document to the network, and then the network will chime in with their notes, and the showrunner will decide which notes will honor and what things will change, and then that writer will do those changes. And so you're doing that like all season long for perhaps a story area document, the short document, it's like, maybe 3 to 5 to 10 pages depending, an outline, which is like 15 pages, and then eventually a script, which is somewhere around 45 to 50 pages, and you just keep doing that. It's just like that kind of almost factory, like, and while the one writer is moving on to script, the other writers go back and start doing the same thing for the next episode, and you just keep going.
That sounds like I think you said factory worker, but I think, that makes sense, but also it makes it sound a lot easier than what I'm envisioning. You brought up Greg Berlanti,
yeah,
and anyone who is a fan of the DC TV universe that he's created. It's interesting. Just quick side note. I was a big fan of Flash and Arrow and that, and he's just Supergirl. He's pumping out all these DC shows, and I was randomly watching a couple of episodes of Dawson's Creek, just kind of reminiscing. And lo and behold, who do I see who was a writer on Dawson's Creek?
That's right.
And I was like, wait, what? It is all making sense now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are certain people who are like him, Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Murphy, J.J. Abrams, you know, Damon Lindelof, who like are able to, John Ridley, who I've worked for, you know, are able to kind of create these different shows and be, you know, John Ridley used to be, before he was doing what he's doing now, he was a comedy writer. He was on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was on the Wanda Sykes show. It's like, you know, there are all of these different incarnations of what these writers do. And yeah, and Greg Berlanti also produced God Friended Me, which was the last show I was on. So his reach is far and wide.
Oh, without question, without question. One of the last questions I had for you is, obviously we're still in a pandemic. I know some people are acting like it's over, but we're still in a pandemic. But I keep reading and seeing like on Twitter, like such and such show is going to start, you know, productions again. And, you know, right before, you know, Robert Pattinson, you know, tests positive for COVID, like, you know, the Batman was restarting production. So I just wanted to know, what is your feelings about production starting back up in the industry, you know, as a pandemic is still happening? And do you feel like the industry is doing enough to ensure that everyone on set is safe?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think a really important one. Look, I have to say that I think it is really important that, I mean, one of the things, you know, that I know both from being an actor on sets and a writer on sets is that, you know, you can imagine being on location or being in a sound stage or on location for a film or a TV show is just, it's a ton of people working together in very close quarters usually. You know, there are makeup people, there are lighting people, there are sound people, there's cameramen, there are actors, there are costume people, you know, it's a ton of people. And, you know, given the fact that that this disease, you know, thrives in, you know, in spaces where lots of humans are gathering, it makes a lot of sense that we have to be really careful about how we do this and how we sort of return to the space of production. You know, there was a moment when I almost took a job on a show where part of the assignment, part of the job, part of the offer was that I would have to go and be on set for a while, you know, for like several months, given the way they were doing production based on COVID. And I ended up not taking that job. And I think in a way, you know, I have to admit to being a little bit relieved that I didn't end up doing that, because I do feel like, you know, I want to sort of see how things pan out before I have to sort of go back to set. And at the same time, I know a bunch of people on a bunch of shows, and shows are in production. I mean, it's, you know, it has been slow, but it's happening. You know, the TV series SWAT, I know one of the creators of, and I have a friend who's on it. That show's been shooting for maybe a month at this point. I know that, you know, Tyler Perry has been doing stuff down south with his own compound where he basically sequesters people, and everybody sort of, you know, they're all sort of in his space, and he's doing, you know, COVID tests and temperature checks, and he does this remarkable thing. I don't know if you've heard about this or read about it, but he'll shoot an entire season of a show in 2 weeks, which is kind of unheard of. And they've already wrapped one of his shows. Sisters was the first one that they did, and they did it in 2 weeks, and they wrapped, and it's in the can. And then they were doing The Oval, his other show, and that was starting several weeks ago. So I'm sure it's done now. You know, so those things are happening. Our show Stargirl goes into production next month in October. And, you know, there are constant meetings with the studio and the network to talk about, you know, what the latest advances are being done, or, you know, what those are. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, and again, look, here's the thing. On some level, obviously, we have to be careful and take care of, like our actors are, our bread and butter. So if the actors go down, there will be huge delays, like in the case of Robert Pattinson. And I think that, people are deadly serious about it, about how to do it. And at the same time, there's lots of conversations with the Screen Actors Guild and the producers, and, they're talking about, one of the things that I've heard that they're talking about is these little sort of inside a soundstage, these little areas where people are only allowed to certain, like, for example, the costume people can only be in a certain area. And then the whatever it is, like the makeup people, whatever, they have these sort of designated zones where the idea is that people have to stay within their zone and they can't just wander around the set the way one used to do before. The food preparation is going to be different. You used to just be able to do cafeteria style, and that's not happening. So, I have hope, and I think on some level we're in a wait and see. But I also think the industry is, these are run by corporations. So the corporations, they want to get back to business because people want to watch their TV like you guys. So it's all happening, and I just hope and pray that it continues to happen in a safe way, outside of the occasional moments and things that we hear about.
Well, I guess I have one last question. You don't have to spend too much time on it, but I know there's plenty of people that try to get into acting, and obviously that's a daunting roll of the dice.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about writing. I know when I was a kid, when I was young, I had like 3 or 4 tablets full of stories, and I would say I'm going to be a movie writer. I'm going to be a TV writer.
Yeah.
I write all these stories and connect them and stuff like that. And I kind of just fell off.
We're waiting, Ryan. Come on.
I wish I could find those notebooks, but I always do wonder, like, if I ever did wanted to get back into it, like, where do you even start? Do you just write? And like, what, there is no, I guess you could go to writing school. I know you went to Juilliard and all that stuff, but I mean, how do you even begin to approach the door? Not even get in the door, but just approach the door to get into writing in movies and TV shows and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are a couple of different things. First of all, for better or worse, I think for better, we live in an age where you can find out anything anywhere. Like, the internet is an amazing resource. There are all kinds of tutorials. There's this whole masterclass thing that site, and there are certainly writing tutorials on that site with famous people teaching. There are all kinds of books you can buy, like Save the Cat, which is a pretty famous screenwriting book, or there are a ton of them. So I mean, I would say that's part of the opportunity to, like, maybe get a really great book and begin to follow the book toward figuring out how you create a character or create an outline, or so that I think is one of the things. There are also coaches. One of the things that I do in addition to my writing and acting is I coach writers.
Wow.
And so and that website, just so people can check it out, is yourcreativelife.com. People can go there and check it out. But there are a ton of people who teach, local colleges, community colleges, as well as, 4-year colleges teach classes. And I remember, actually, before I went to drama school as a playwright, there was Warner Brothers actually was doing this pilot program at Morgan State University in Baltimore, where I was living at the time. And I did 2 classes there with a curriculum that they had developed. I don't think they're doing that anymore, but I learned a ton about how to write TV long before I ever got paid to write for TV. So I think that's one of the things to do is definitely find some good instruction, a good book, practice. And then I think here's the other thing. We also live in an age where you can make stuff on your cell phone. You can you can buy a camera if you want, but there's no reason that anybody who's got real interest can't sit down, create something, and put it on YouTube. I made a web series several years ago, and It definitely did things for my career. People can do that. I think those are the things to do, is like practice, make something, put it on YouTube, and then repeat.
Wow.
Just figure out how to do it.
I gotta go. I gotta find my tablets, man.
Got to get on it, Ryan.
I mean, you guys could. It's a natural that you could create, the two of you, if you wanted to, could create a show about two guys creating a podcast. Like there's a show idea.
That's not a bad idea. So before we let you go, we talked about movies, TV. So I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you all-time favorite TV show, all-time favorite movie.
Oh my God, all-time favorite. I don't know. You can't do that to me. Wow. I don't know.
Like I know Ryan's favorite all-time show is The Wire. My all-time favorite show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Wow.
We just got to know. That's a wide spectrum. Like those are complete opposites.
It is a wide spectrum. I'm trying to think. All-time favorite. Look, okay, I'm going to name a handful of shows because I don't think I can do the all-time favorite. I just can't.
Okay.
All right. So let's see. Huge fan of LA Law. Huge fan more recently of Atlanta.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And huge fan of The Good Wife.
Ooh.
So those three for TV shows. For movies, a huge fan of Boys in the Hood.
All right. Rest in peace, John Singleton.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of, I will say, Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, buddy.
Right? And then, oh yes, huge fan of, I will say huge fan of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
So there you go, 3 and 3.
All right, I appreciate it. Yeah, Monsters Inc. that's one of my all-time favorites. Legitimate,
great movie.
All-time favorites.
I haven't seen that. I gotta watch that.
What?
You haven't seen it?
I have not watched it.
Wow. Well, you're in for a treat.
It's a classic. So I think we covered a wide gamut of things. So anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure you were more informed about the industry and entertainment and pop culture in general before this episode. Steve, we really appreciate you coming on. Gracing us with your time.
Thank you for having me.
And just sharing your knowledge and just having an open conversation with us, and we really appreciate it. And I also want to thank you, and I feel like I shouldn't be thanking you for this, but anytime we have someone on, person of color who are Black, just like Ryan and I are, and the fact that we can just have open conversation of just the realness of what the world is, and I think we kind of talked about a little bit about TV shows and showing history, but it's imperative for us to be honest in regards to what the world is going on, regardless of what our experiences. At the end of the day, we're Black men living in America, whether we're in the entertainment industry, social services, it doesn't matter. We all have experiences of what this world, with the lens that this world it sees us as. And so just kind of just talking about it in an open forum and shining light to it. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the candid and open conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's imperative that we have open and honest conversations. I feel like that's the thing that's going to create the space for the kind of change that we need in the world, and I'm all about it. So I'm grateful to be here to do that as well.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much for coming on, Steve. Hope potentially later down the line we can get you on again and just have maybe not so much a entertainment walkthrough, but actually talk about entertainment in terms of just shows and things like that. I think that would be great and fun for us to do as well.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Great to do it.
All right, so that's it, guys. That's another episode of Hashtag Saints Twitter podcast. So we've given you 2 episodes within this week. We've given you the preview for week 1 for Bucks Saints. We just had a conversation with Steve Harper, just going everything entertainment, pop culture related. Football on Sunday, so say your prayers and cross your fingers. and then we'll be back next week to recap the game and see who else we can get on the show. So with that, we're out.
Peace.
O'Reilly. You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.